Before I start my story, I want to appeal to everyone who doesn't have a big financial cushion under their asses and is forced to buy or rent inexpensive housing in old buildings. Listen to me carefully. No matter how attractive the price is, no matter how convenient it is for you to get to work or college, be sure to check the place where you are going to live. Try to find out as much information about your future place of residence. Take my word for it. Because who knows what was once happening in these apartments and houses dozens of years ago. After all, the walls have memories, and the situation that developed not so long ago with me is the clearest proof of it. I rented an apartment on the outskirts of New York. I had no desire to live in a dormitory, cook, and shower side by side with all kinds of unpleasant strangers. The main stone that crashed all my dreams of normal life and my own, even though rented housing, was a catastrophic lack of money, even despite the fact that I was working and earning more or less enough. New York is a big city. There is enough space for everyone, and for me too. By the way, I've been living here for a few months. I worked hard as hell, trying to find something I would be really interested in. Lying on a bunk near the sniffing migrant workers in a hostel, I dreamed of wealth, or at least about a separate living space. I didn't want to go back to the shithole from which I arrived, as well as lying nearby neighbors from the Middle East. During the day, I worked, and at night I surfed the net, trying to find cheap accommodation. There were very few options, and they all looked not much better than the hostel where I lived. You know, sometimes I even tried to find some goddamn advantages of living here. Well, I'm in the city of dreams, and I'm working here. Jesus, sounds not so good. Finally, after a few days of searching, I still found quite a good option. The apartment was in the Bronx, and it was owned by an elderly lady. Frankly, I wasn't repulsed by the fact that my place of work was on the opposite side of the city. Then I was ready to suffer the early rise and crowding in the subway, just to spend the evenings in an old but comfortable flat. As soon as I crossed the threshold, the smell of antiquity and dust hit my nose, and perhaps there was something else. It was the incredibly disgusting perfume of the owner of the apartment.
"Andrew, please come in, look around, and I'll put the kettle on."
Smiling, said the old woman, and went into the kitchen. I took my shoes off and went into the hall. The apartment seemed to be large, though it was written in the ad that there were only 35 squares. The most likely reason for this was a wide corridor and a fairly spacious kitchen. It was clear that the layout wasn't original. There was a renovation done a very long time ago. Old, but in good condition wallpaper, linoleum, furniture, a creaky spring couch, and even a TV made me feel at home.
"How do you like it, Andrew?"
mumbled the old woman as she entered the living room. Seems to be good. I really liked it. Compared to the hostel, it was some kind of luxury apartment. Obviously, it was old, but a proper cleaning, brighter light bulbs, and a computer in the corner will completely change the interior.
"Welcome to your new housing, but I should tell you some nuances before I leave you alone."
We went into the kitchen and sat down at the table. The old lady poured us some tea and sat down opposite. Should I pay for the first and the last month? I was the first to break the silence.
"Whatever you like, Andrew. You may pay only for the first one, and then we'll figure it out. How long are you planning to stay?"
Suddenly, with a strange expression, she asked as a strict owner looked at a stray dog.
"My neighbor told me how to put the ad. I would never have thought of that myself."
Hope to stay here for a long time. You have a nice place. What were the details you wanted to tell me?
"Oh, nothing in particular."
She leaned closer to me.
"Don't go to the bathroom at night. Take a shower in the evening. or even during the day.
Why? I asked in bewilderment.
At night, the water is often cut off, and there are some problems with the sewage. As the pipes are ancient, sometimes the feces from the whole building rise and fill the tub. It happens only at night. I don't understand why.
Okay. Thanks. I'll keep that in mind, I said with a fake smile and pulled out the crumpled bills from my wallet, hinting to the old lady that it would be time for her to give me the keys and leave the apartment. She in turn understood the hint and soon left, wishing me luck and slamming the front door. A draft apparently, I thought, scratching the back of my head, and fell on the dusty couch smiling. Am I really lucky? Now I won't see those narrow-eyed faces every morning and evening. Cleaning would be a good idea. What is more, I still need to move some belongings, but I can do it in one go. With these thoughts, I got dressed and after locking the door, ran down the stairs, wanting as soon as possible to take all my stuff and be back here again. I was happy as a little kid, by golly. It was evening, rush hour, which means heavy traffic. The subway was swarming with people like a huge anthill of insects. I still didn't cease to be amazed at it. For me, who had come from the middle of nowhere and had seen nothing but livestock and shit in which they grazed all day long, it was insanely interesting. I felt this bustling life, and I liked it. So, about 2 hours later, I was finally struggling to get up the stairs, dragging a heavy bag behind me. The mood was upbeat. It even made me walk faster. I opened the door, and the first thing I felt was a strange smell in the apartment. I turned on the light and, remembering what the mistress said, went into the bathroom. Damn, I rumbled with my hand over my nose. Why does it happen to me? The drain in the bathroom was clogged, and every now and then, some scraps, along with gray muddy water, came out of it, slowly filling the tub. The stench was unbearable, and not even the landlady's perfume, which she had forgotten on the kitchen countertop, helped. I looked at my watch. It didn't seem to be too late, so I decided to visit my neighbors to find out what the problem was, and whether I was the only one to have it happen. It was dark in the staircase, only 2 floors below. A dim light bulb winked ominously. I knocked on one door, then another, and another. No one responded. Strange. It's just 9 p.m. Has everyone gone to bed? I went back home and tried to pierce the gutter with a plunger. The dirty water, along with the strange pieces of debris, slowly began to disappear. That night, I had time to cook some food and clean the apartment a bit. It was close to nighttime when the sound came to me from the same bathroom. I don't even know how to describe it. It reminded me of the sound which occurs when you finish the drink and suck air through a tube. In a few minutes, that same disgusting smell filled the room. The dirty, smelly water came up from the drain again, only this time, much faster. I didn't think much of it at the time until I realized that the plunger was no longer helping, and the water was still rising. I dialed the landlady. The phone rang and rang, but no one picked up. Probably she was sleeping. I was indignant, trying to break the clog with a plunger. My hands were already up to my elbows in the sludge when all the water began to flow away, leaving an unpleasant sticky residue on the inner walls of the tub. I stood, thinking about possible ways to take a shower and go to bed. I had to get up early for work the next day, after all. Soon, really strange things began to happen in these walls. That night, I heard the sound from the sewer again. The first ray of sunlight struck me right in the eyes and made me wake up. But no, that was not the only reason. Either I was dreaming, or I actually heard someone's voice in my own apartment. I opened my eyes. No, I wasn't dreaming. There was really some indecipherable speech coming from the kitchen. Did I forget to close the window? I got up from my bed, put on my slippers, went out into the corridor. I rubbed my eyes, but nothing had changed. What the hell happened here? I thought to myself, looking around. The wallpaper seemed to be freshly glued on. Some strange portraits were hanging on the walls, which weren't there when I settled in. The apartment looked like it had been cleaned and repaired before I woke up. Even the smell of chlorine was still in the air. I didn't get it. Is this some kind of prank or something? But what was that voice I heard? I went into the kitchen, looked in the bathroom. No one was there. Surprisingly, the bathtub was clean, as if it had just been brought in from the store. All the walls were clean, and the linoleum was new, without small holes in it that I had noticed the night before. I went back to the room. All my things were still there, which was interesting. Could it be that someone had been here? Did the landlady enter the apartment and clean it? I don't understand. Well, I certainly noticed that she is strange, but it's too much. In any case, I did all the morning procedures and started my workday, during which I had already managed to forget about this morning's incident. In the evening, when I got back home, the same voices made me worry. I was getting the keys out of my bag when I heard the voice coming from the inside. No, this time it was really there. It couldn't be my imagination. Someone was moaning, whether from pain or from longing, and judging by the voice, it was an adult. I opened the door, entered the apartment, turned on the light. There was no one, and the apartment returned to the same state as the first time. Am I going crazy or what? I thought, checking the apartment for intruders. It was empty. No one was there. I went into the room and noticed that I didn't make my bed in the morning. Nevertheless, there was a huge brownish yellow stain on the sheets. It wasn't here when I left. Where did it come from? In general, I examined the entire couch from bottom to top and found nothing that could leave such traces. I called the landlady with the idea of telling her everything that happened in the morning and ask her what the hell is going on here and why she came here without my knowledge.
We're sorry. We are unable to complete your call as dialed.
The answering machine's voice took me a little aback. The number was correct, so I called again. Same thing. What the hell is going on? I swore, and gathering a pile of dirty bedding, went to the bathroom. Luckily, there were spare sheets in the closet. After dinner, I finally got into a clean bed and closed my eyes. The next night, in these walls, made me really think about seeing a psychiatrist. I woke up to the same moaning from the kitchen, but it was interrupted by another voice. It was a woman shouting at someone. I got out of bed and saw the same portraits and paintings on the walls, fresh wallpaper, and linoleum. The shouting didn't cease. It was muffled and became more and more distinct as I approached the kitchen, and when I went into the hallway, I could hear clearly what was going on there.
When are you going to die? How much longer do I have to be tortured?
Shouted a woman's voice. I looked out from behind the wall and gasped in shock. An old woman in a long nightgown to the floor sat at the kitchen table. There was also a younger woman. That was she who shouted those terrible words. The older woman, in turn, only mooed and groaned, staring at the dim light bulb hanging from the ceiling on a thin wire. I remained in shock, not understanding what was going on. The young woman continued to yell, and her tinkling voice was like a sharp needle in my ears. Finally, I couldn't stand it and entered the kitchen. "Who are you? And what are you doing in my flat?" I was indignant. The answer was the same old yelling. It was as if they didn't notice me and went about their business. A few minutes later, I decided to go outside for some fresh air. I was afraid. It was frightening to stay there, to listen to those wishes for a quick death. I went outside, and it was so cold that it chilled me to the bone. Still, I don't think that cold was the main reason for shaking. Something inexplicable was happening in my apartment, and I didn't know what to do about it. I barely had any money left. Where should I go? What to do next? And the cold was starting to make my teeth chatter. After about an hour, I was on my way back up to my rented apartment. I opened the door, and thank God there was silence inside. Even the walls looked normal again, so I tried to sleep. The next night was the same. I heard the sounds, but this time they were very close to me, right in the bedroom. I opened my eyes. The same woman who apparently yelled at her mother. I realized this after looking at those portraits hanging on the wall that night, was standing with her back to me and stirred something in a glass of water, tinkling with a metal spoon.
Who the hell are you?
I cried out in my sleep. She didn't pay any attention to me.
Who are you?
I shouted again. In response, the woman just went into the kitchen, and from there I heard a muffled sound.
Hey Mom, here's your medicine.
The woman murmured in a kind voice. Then there were loud gulps, coughs and moans again. I just couldn't stand them, so I tried to cover my ears, but it didn't help. Obviously, I couldn't sleep properly for the next few days, or rather, nights. I had nowhere to go, no friends, acquaintances, or relatives in this vast metropolis. I have repeatedly asked my coworkers to shelter me until my next paycheck, or at least lend me money to go back to the hostel. No one agreed to help me. Time after time, I still returned to the same 5-story building, the same apartment with whose owner I still couldn't get in touch. This strange and frightening phenomenon continued for about a week. During this time, I even got used to them, or rather, I just tried not to pay attention to them. The headphones were a great help to me. I could fall asleep only with music. Otherwise, the loud and resounding screaming kept pulling me out of the embrace of sleep. Another cold evening, I was reluctantly returning home from work. It was incredibly cold that day, and as I walked out of the subway station, I kept dreaming of a cup of hot tea. I even figured out some details from what I had seen in that apartment. Apparently, the old woman was the mother of the woman who was yelling and wanted her to die as soon as possible. She was very sick, and that made her daughter very uncomfortable. When I opened the door, the heat hit me in the face, so that I staggered back and almost fell down the stairs. It was as if I had opened the door to a sweat room. Moist hot air filled the entryway with steam. I even assumed there was a fire in those seconds, but no. I walked into the apartment. The humidity was unbelievable, and it was hot, so I was instantly covered in sweat. There was water everywhere. The wallpaper was detached from the walls. The apartment was a terrible mess, and it smelled like boiled meat. When I opened the door to the bathroom, my body was thrown into a terrible chill, even though it was hot in the room. The very same woman was boiling in a bathtub filled with hot water. Her skin had already begun to flake off, along with the meat from her bones. The water itself was reddish yellow. Being terrified, I began to call the police. They wouldn't think of me because I was at work all this time. The smell made me vomit, and so did the sight of it. In some places, there were terrible blisters on her skin, and the bones of her feet were even visible under the water. I waited for the police in the yard, thinking about the reason why I didn't call them earlier. The tough guys with machine guns would definitely solve my problems. But when they finally deigned to arrive an hour later, there was no water or a dead body in the bathroom. The cops even wanted to write me up for making a false call. They left, but the sagging wallpaper and condensation piled up under the ceiling indicated that I wasn't imagining. Panic was already breathing down my neck. It was some kind of damnation, a phenomenon that defies common sense and logic. This is too much. Tonight is my last night here. Tomorrow I'll pack my bags and leave. Maybe I'll beg at the subway, or just get back to the hostel. After dinner, I went to bed. I lay there expecting anything, but surprisingly, the apartment was quiet at night. Will I sleep well tonight? I thought, and rolled over to the other side, closing my eyes. In the middle of the night, I heard sounds from the bathroom again. I had to get up and check out what I had already observed over the course of those days. So many times. It was only now that I was walking, looking at the newly hung and bloated portraits, and noticing that there was that old woman on them. I remembered her, and then in the kitchen I had seen the landlady of the apartment. It gave my whole body goosebumps. I wanted to go into the bathroom, but through an open door, I noticed it was full, and there was this same boiled corpse in it, only the smell was different. It was rotting, decaying, obviously decomposing right in the water. It was the last straw. When I realized what was going on, I ran into the room and began to pack my belongings in a hurry. The smell of the apartment was unbearable. While running to the exit, I noticed that the door to the bathroom was ajar, and she looked out from it. A half-decomposed body stood poking its head out of the doorway. She blinked reddish dead eyes. The skin was still flaking off of her body, exposing the gray bones. The door creaked open slowly, and what was standing in the bathroom came out in small steps. I was shivering. My insides clenched. My head ached badly. I couldn't take my eyes off the living corpse moving toward me. There was a nasty yellowish trail behind her. It moved, just as it had been there, only quieter. The horror that gripped me then can't be described in words. It was horrible. How is it possible? Finally, when she was already standing a few meters away from me, I came to my senses, and grabbing the bag, I rushed as fast as I could from the apartment. I even fell a couple of times, but the adrenaline raging then in the body blunted the pain. Finally, I ran out of the stairwell and rushed away. I calmed down a bit, only when I saw cars on the road. I spent that night outdoors like a homeless person, sleeping in an underpass, the only warm place I could find. It was a miracle that I hadn't been robbed. It was better than staying with a walking, decomposing body in the same apartment. Obviously, it was hard to fall asleep for a long time. She was in my head, and I had only one question in my mind. If it was the landlady, and she was dead, then who had been in the apartment on the first day? Who was taking my money? Who was making the tea? It was definitely her. In the portraits, then in the kitchen when the daughter wished her dead. How is that possible?